Welcome, welcome, welcome. And to all who are watching, enter if you dare. Somewhere over the dark forests of Washington state, on the night of November 24th, 1971, a man walked to the back of a commercial airliner. He lowered the rear staircase and stepped into the void. He was never found. He carried $200,000 in marked bills. He carried a parachute he had already taken apart and put back together with his own hands. He knew the terrain beneath him. He knew the plane's fuel load, its flight procedures, its exact capabilities. And for 55 years, the FBI knew more than they told you. My name is the Archivist. I pull the files that were never meant to see daylight. Tonight, I'm holding 668 pages the Bureau quietly released into their Freedom of Information vault in October 2025. What they contain will change how you understand this case. It begins with a seat on a Tuesday afternoon flight. Portland, Oregon, November 24th, 1971. Northwest Orient, Flight 305, a short hop to Seattle, 36 passengers, a routine crew. A man calling himself Dan Cooper settles into seat 18C at the rear of a Boeing 727, dark business suit, black clip-on tie, dark sunglasses. He orders a bourbon and soda. He pays in exact change. At 2:50 in the afternoon, the flight lifts off. 36 minutes later, somewhere over the southern Washington sky, Dan Cooper passes a handwritten note to a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. She assumes it's a phone number. She doesn't look at it. He leans toward her and speaks quietly. "Miss, you'd better look at that note." The note says he has a bomb. What happens next? The FBI spent 55 years cataloging, analyzing, and carefully redacting. Cooper doesn't panic, doesn't shout. The 668-page dossier describes a man of extraordinary calm and precise, detailed knowledge. He tells the crew what he wants: $200,000 in negotiable American currency, 2 front parachutes, 2 back parachutes, a refueling stop in Seattle, then Mexico. When Seattle ground crews try to stall, claiming the fuel tanks aren't quite full, Cooper doesn't accept it. The files state he was, quote, specifically well-informed in refueling procedures to the point that the crew had difficulty convincing him that only 96% of the required fuel was on board. He knew the fuel margins. He knew the plane. And when they bring the parachutes on board, Cooper does something that stops the crew cold. He takes one apart. The FBI file documents it plainly. A flight attendant noticed one of the parachutes had been unpacked and asked if he had taken it apart. His reply, yes. He was checking for sabotage. He didn't trust what authorities gave him. He verified the equipment himself. This is not a desperate man. This is not a gambler. This is someone who planned every contingency. Seattle, 5:24 p.m. The plane touches down. Authorities hand over the ransom, $200,000 in marked $20 bills, every serial number recorded. The passengers deplane, the crew refuels, and as the 727 lifts off again into the November darkness, heading south, Dan Cooper begins his exit. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, over the dense fir forests of southwest Washington, the aft staircase descends. The crew feels a single bump from the tail section. Dan Cooper is gone. An F-106 fighter scrambles to track the aircraft. The Air Force deploys an SR-71 Blackbird, the fastest reconnaissance aircraft ever built, to fly 5 passes over the suspected drop zone. The SR-71 sees nothing. Poor visibility. Trees and darkness and rain. The man is gone. They searched for months, then years. The Bureau opened NORJAK, Northwest Hijacking, and by February 1972, just 3 months later, 325 suspects had already been placed under investigation. 220 had been cleared. The rest were followed, photographed, monitored for years. One suspect, a man from Bellingham, Washington named Ferdinand Arndt, was investigated and then cleared. His grounds for elimination? I am reading this directly from the file, solely on the basis of his unusually large and prominent nose. The FBI was thorough. They were also desperate. Their real focus, then and now, centered on a man named Richard Floyd McCoy, Jr., A pilot, an Army veteran, a trained paratrooper. In April 1972, just 5 months after Cooper, McCoy hijacked a United Airlines flight in an almost identical operation. Same parachute exit, same ransom demand. He was caught. He escaped from federal prison. He was killed by the FBI in 1974. The new files reveal what the Bureau never disclosed publicly. They doctored McCoy's photograph, altering the image to show him wearing the exact sunglasses witnesses described on Cooper. Side by side with the FBI's composite sketch, the resemblance is almost exact. In December 2025, a parachute found on McCoy family property was seized, tested by federal agents, and then quietly returned, without explanation. And then there is the tie. The black clip-on tie Cooper left on seat 18C in 1971 has never yielded a fingerprint, a DNA match, or an identity. But forensic analysis documented in the 2025 release found something extraordinary. Under microscopic examination, the tie contains over 100,000 microscopic particles, bismuth, unalloyed titanium, rare industrial metals that in 1971 were present in only a handful of specialized manufacturing environments like the aerospace industry, like Boeing. In 1980, a small boy playing along the Columbia River found a bundle of decomposed bills in the mud, $5,800. Serial numbers matched the Cooper ransom exactly, but the bills were not buried at the time of the hijacking. Diatom analysis, microscopic algae that bloom only in spring, indicates the money entered the water months after November 1971. Cooper was alive at least through the following spring. And then, nothing. The FBI officially closed the active investigation in 2016, after 45 years, after 1,000 serious suspects, after an SR-71 and 668 classified pages, and a tie sitting in an evidence locker. They closed it without naming a single suspect. What I find most unsettling, after reading every page of those files, is not the mystery of who he was. It is the certainty of what he was. A man who knew exactly what he was doing, who trusted nothing, who collected every scrap of paper he ever touched on that flight, every written note, every used match, and took it with him into the void. One black tie, 100,000 particles of titanium, $5,800 in the mud, and somewhere, either deep in those Washington forests or living quietly under another name until the day he died, the man who called himself Dan Cooper simply ceased to exist. The Archivist keeps pulling the files. Subscribe to Blood-Curdling Chronicles. Hit the bell, because the next file is already open, and it's worse than this one.